Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk. Back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal Transfer Show. Joining you every morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Thank you as always for making this a part of your morning routines. It's very much appreciated. Thank you as always for dropping a like on the video. It takes you just a second to do it. So if you could, that would be so much more appreciated than usual. We managed to get over 1,000 likes in yesterday's video, which was unbelievable as we continue to welcome back plenty of our listeners from a season hiatus. Those that love the Arsenal Transfer Show, it is indeed back. And yeah, very, very good indeed to be here. Let's go into the chat box. Say good morning to people. Peter, good morning to you, to Matt G, to Paul, to Carl. Good morning to Stevie and Blackshine and Steve. Good morning to Kaiser. Relay, yes, I did indeed sky my potential opportunity to score a goal, but it is what it is. You can't score them all. Vegas Gooner, good morning to you, to Temi, to Olu, Mr. E, Martin, Granddaddy Gooner, Philly, Boss, Matt, Jack, Stephen, Gary, Blackshine, Arasilki. Good morning to everybody. Hope you're doing good and well. Really appreciate all of you tuning in and everybody else as well. Also appreciated. As Relay hinted towards, I did indeed upload the video of our day out at the Emirates Stadium on Wednesday. If you haven't yet given that a watch, please make sure you do. I'm feeling a bit better now, 2 days after. Less broken, still pain, but less broken indeed. Go and give it a watch, though. It's the latest upload on the channel. You'll find it in the video section. It'll be on your feeds as well if you're subscribed to the channel. But I recommend you give it a watch. 10 minutes of fun games and some good laughs, and it was a really cool experience. But a massive thank you again to Arsenal for hosting the media on Wednesday, because it was very, very enjoyable indeed. So I recommend you giving it a watch. Moving into the news, and Newcastle are said to be confident on a deal despite interest from Aston Villa to sign Kieran Tierney. Yet, according to Gary Jacob, Arsenal want more than £30 million to sell the defender. Again, this continues to kind of create debate and create discussion around how much Arsenal should kind of be looking for. And I think it was Giant Gooner on Twitter yesterday that pointed out Arsenal paid £30 million for Alexander Zinchenko from Manchester City, a player that was the second choice at the time at their club that were at the top of the league, and Arsenal paid around £30 million for a player that they were open to selling. And I think that should give you context around what the price tag of Kieran Tierney is going to be. So for those that think we should be looking for way over £40 million, in the 50s and 60s, it's just not realistic. And in the context of the market, that too. And I think that Zinchenko's price tag is a great indicator of that as well. Moving forwards, Reiss Nelson's contract should be signed and soon announced, with a significant wage bump as well, it seems. He was on around £60,000 per week, and that could rise to something potentially close to what Eddie Nketiah is on at the moment. Sammy Mokbel of the Mail reporting the story that there has indeed been a breakthrough in talks, and reported there was interest from significant clubs in Europe and, of course, in England as well. AC Milan is said to be a club that were considering potentially offering Nelson a deal, but it seems as though that breakthrough will indeed push him towards Arsenal renewing the contract, which is good news. And I was discussing this with a few people yesterday. Arsenal's financial might is going to be very much focused on the midfield and on the defence. And so if Arsenal were to lose Reiss Nelson, it could affect how they approach those two areas of the field, because they only have a certain level of budget. It's a big budget, thankfully, but that budget is still limited in some capacity as well. But what I would look to specifically in this action is obviously the fact that we can keep a player that has absolutely made an impact at the club, absolutely had great chances when coming off the bench and made moments for the team last season. And we can keep him at the club for no transfer fee at all and focus our investment on midfield and defence as well. Now, Bayern Munich were said to have an interest in Granit Xhaka. However, Florian Pletterberg has reported that it is not hot at this stage and that Bayer Leverkusen remain favourites to sign Granit Xhaka. I think this deal has been delayed. I spoke to Granit Xhaka after the Nottingham Forest game, and he told me and Simon Collins from the Evening Standard, as I told you, that there would be an announcement on his future before the Wolves game. That announcement never came. And obviously we saw farewell messages at the Emirates and a very extended farewell goodbye and more emphasis from Xhaka, as if the feeling it was his last game. And yet we've still not heard confirmation on this. Now, it's my understanding that this is because Arsenal are more keen to kind of focus on making sure that they get the midfield reinforcement. It's not necessarily, guaranteed, it seems, that Xhaka will go. I think that he will, and I think that he's certainly is heading towards the exit door. But I think the delay in this is because Arsenal want to ensure that they don't leave themselves short in midfield, and we'll have to wait and see who indeed it is that they push for. I think we all know who those players are. Now, PSG are said to be interested in William Saliba. This is according to Ben Jacobs of CBS Sports. However, Arsenal are expected to get the defender renewed with a new deal. We're obviously very hopeful that this is a contract that can be secured in the coming months. And those reports that we heard of around £120,000 per week contracts being offered, it seems were quite old. And actually that contract offer was made some time ago. And that the latest offers are actually the latest discussions are around figures that hopefully will get toward what we will see an agreement upon. And we know that, he's worth the investment. He's worth us paying a significant amount of money to keep him at the club, because the transfer fee that it would take to replace him is going to be absolutely massive. So it's always going to be imperative that we keep players at the level of Saliba at the club. But PSG are sniffing around the potential move, but as they try and move towards French young players, and he ticks both those boxes, as Ben Jacobs says. But there is an expectation, hopefully, that they will renew the contract with the player before any potential interest from outside comes in. I'm moving to potential incomings, and again, we have to talk about Sacha Boey. According to the Turkish Gazette, which has reported a story yesterday, Arsenal are determined to close a deal to try and sign Sacha Boey of Galatasaray. A bid of around 20 million euros has supposedly been tabled, with Galatasaray looking for closer to 25 million euros. Arsenal are said to want to get this deal done quickly, and we'll have to wait and see whether or not this does indeed turn out to be the case. Hopefully, Arsenal get a deal done for Boey, because he's a really fantastically talented player. And the tactical breakdown that we did on Boey, that if you've not watched, you definitely should, will need to educate you, certainly to give you all the insight you need on the player and find out why he would be a really great option for Arsenal to bring in this summer. And lastly, Xavi Simons, the Dutch international, currently at PSV, is said to be being tracked by Arsenal. This information comes from Rick Elfrink at the moment, who is a Dutch journalist covering the likes of PSV and all the other Dutch sides, who writes for AD Sportwereld, or AD, I suppose maybe it is, like RZ. But Sportwereld, and has reported this information that Arsenal are tracking them. His agent is been changed, and his agent is actually the son of David Dein, who you should recognise from previously working in the higher up sections of Arsenal with Arsene Wenger back in the day during the era of the Invincibles and before that. So very much an exciting player. There's always been this question mark around Xavi Simons, because PSG is said to have a very small buyback clause of around 12 million pounds or 12 million euros potentially. But it's always been down to Xavi Simons whether or not he would actually move back. You can't force the player to move back. If they play the buyback clause, Xavi Simons has to be wanting to go there. If PSV are to sell him, there's expectations that he'll be sold for around similar money to what they sold Cody Gakpo, so upwards of £30 million. But he's a creative player, a forward-thinking player, a very versatile player that can play central midfield. He can play in forward positions, and certainly would be a young star that Arsenal could bring in. And he's certainly an exciting one as well. And I know a player that a lot of people have been talking about for quite some time. So let's wait and see. But if this does progress, and if Arsenal's interest in Simons does progress, it will certainly be a player that we can do some digging on and some tactical breakdowns on as well. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions right after this. Right then, let's go into the chat box. I wanted to pick up on some of the comments that were coming in when we were talking about Kieran Tierney's contract, specifically why he's costing around 30 and the comparisons to Zinchenko. Arsenal Football Addict says that Zinchenko had 1 year left on his deal. Well, Tierney, as far as I'm aware, has just 2, which doesn't increase things significantly in the world of football these days. Also, Tierney has been playing second fiddle for quite some time, and also the significant injury problems that Kieran Tierney has had has made things worse. Yes, Zinchenko has also had some injury issues whilst he was there. He does have 3 years left on his contract, to be fair. It doesn't run out in 2026. But I still think that price tag that was paid for Zinchenko, you think about how much we pay for Gabriel Jesus as well at £45 million. I've always said that we should be looking to aim closer to £40 million. I think anything over £40 million would be a massive coup for the club to be able to get. But as Adam says here, got to get 40 million for Tierney, especially if it's to another Premier League team. And RM says that Chilwell and Cucurella cost £50 million. Again, Cucurella was going from Brighton, who always typically send to sell really high. Their reputation in selling is of such. And also Chilwell as well went from Leicester, again, a club that notoriously get very big fees to their players. They also were starting every single game for their clubs and hadn't at that time had any respective injury issues. So that's why you're always going to see a higher price tag for those players. But certainly we're looking at signing or selling a player, I think, for between 30 and 40, which I think is more accurate to what he's worth in the market. Tammy says Tierney's worth 50 million. Noasa says 50 million. I'm sorry, you're just not going to get 50 million for Tierney. And in this current market, he is just not going to be getting you that amount of money. Clive says, I think the Reiss wage thing is maybe inaccurate reporting. He's currently on around £16,000 per week and is going to 60. So a quick check on the claims of around £60 million. I saw these reports out yesterday, but it's always important to make sure that we do double check on these things. But let's have a quick check. Is this information? Apparently, his current salary is, let's have a quick check on the Mail's article. Sami Mokbel of the Mail claiming that the deal is worth significantly more than his current 60 million a week package. That's the package, of course, including bonuses, etc. But it could be, and as we always talk about, wages are one of the most usually inaccurately reported things, and so trying to find out what a player is on is also very, very difficult indeed. Gooner Jake says, Tom, do you think we have enough up front for the Champions League? Also, should we get another striker and rotate Jesus with Saka? I personally think that we should. Yes, I would be looking to bring in another centre forward. I want to see variation. I want to see Arteta given different options to tackle different problems. So the options that we have currently to play in the front three are Gabriel Jesus, Eddie Nketiah, Folarin Balogun at the moment, depending on what happens with him. Leandro Trossard, Reiss Nelson, Bukayo Saka, Gabriel Martinelli, Emile Smith-Rowe, and also Fabio Vieira can play in one of those front three roles in a different type of fashion, but there are significant question marks over him. That's a lot of players. I've probably even forgotten one, to be honest. You got to think about the youth players that are potentially coming through. Mario Kocha-Dubry, very exciting. Ethan Nwaneri, very exciting. But I think Arsenal do need to go out and get a centre forwards of a different style to add something different to what we've already got in the team. But the priorities are absolutely still midfield and defence. Maximir says, hey, Tom, back after a while. What are your thoughts on the Tony Adams comments on the squad having hit its ceiling? I'm slightly irritated by Mr. Arsenal now doing our rivals' work. I don't agree with Mr. Adams at all. On that point, I don't think this team has hit its ceiling. I think it's a little bit short-sighted. If you consider the fact that Arsenal have had, the second youngest team in the league with the second youngest coach and managed to compete with City for a title, if you think that team's hit a ceiling, that's quite counterintuitive. So I'm not sure, unless we're misinterpreting his intention of his words, I don't think it makes that much sense. Ed says, and good to see you in the chat, my friend. Haven't seen any words on Patino lately, with possibly Partey joining Xhaka through the exit doors. Any chance that he will change his mind and stay? There should be lots of playing time available, even with those incomings, if Partey and Xhaka were to leave. I still don't think that Partey is going to be going. I could be wrong, but I don't think that he will. Patino has almost seemingly made his mind up about things. I spoke to someone very close to the player recently who told me that it was all an issue of timing and that, unfortunately, because of the pathway not being obvious right now, that's what's led Patino to be keen to seek a permanent exit elsewhere. I think that the money that we should get for Patino, we should be looking for around the £10 million figure, 10 to 15, because you're going to look to try and insert a buyback clause into that. You need to look to insert that amount of money. And that's going to decrease any transfer fee that comes in. If you add a buyback clause into a deal, it's always going to lower the transfer fee. So let's see. But I don't still think that there is a pathway, unfortunately, Ed, which is a shame, but I can't see it. Let's go to, I've talked about Anthony Taylor yesterday. You can hear my thoughts on that yesterday. Wes says, how ruthless do you think Arteta needs to be with not only his potential outgoings from the current squad and incomings to ensure we can be competitive as possible and enable us to go up another level? Ruthlessness has always been an Arteta's repertoire of traits and characteristics. It's always something that he's wanted to instill in the team, and I think that he will be ruthless. You think about Tavares, signed 1 year, gone. Lokonga, signed 18 months, gone. Sent out on loan, and they're probably going to leave this summer. He's being ruthless with not only players that were already at the club, but players that also have been signed under his tenure. Pablo Mari, signed, gone. Cedric, probably gone. He's making these decisions, and also always is going to be trying to do what he thinks is best for the team. And so far, based upon where we've gone, the progression we've made, you can't discredit those decisions. Adam says, how has Omar Rekic been for Wigan, and does he have any chance of breaking into the first team? In answer to the second question first, no, I don't think he does. Omar Rekic playing for Wigan, who got relegated last season, I don't think has shone in any particular way to show that he's got that potential to play in the Arsenal first team anytime soon. He went to Sparta Rotterdam for the first 6 months of the season and couldn't even get into their senior side. I don't think that is a realistic expectation at the moment, unfortunately. Let's go to Stephen says, how many midfielders do we need if Xhaka and, if rumours are correct, Partey? If they both leave, you need at least three. I think with Xhaka going, we need at least two. I think we need the Reiss, and that's not even counting the creative midfielder. So if Xhaka goes, I think we need a Reiss and Caicedo, or a Reiss and Gundogan, or that's the type we should be looking at. If Partey goes, I think that we need a Reiss, Caicedo, and a Gundogan potentially coming in. That's why I don't think we should let Partey leave, and that's not including the creative midfielder I'd also like to see us bring in to potentially evolve that left 8 position if we ever wanted to. Be that a Mount, be that a Maddison, be that a Gabri Veiga, be that an Arda Güler, someone like that. I don't know, but I think that's what we need. So if they both leave, then we've got a lot of work to do, a hell of a lot of work. Evgeny says, would you loan out or sell Vieira if the options were for next season? We would have to bring somebody in, of course, and that would depend on the creative midfielder that we brought in. But if there was a good option to loan him, potentially, also if a good fee came in for him, I would also be tempted to sell already. You need to be ruthless in the market, and if we get a good figure, I don't think it would be the worst idea in the world. I don't know who's going to offer that, though, is the problem that we've got, unfortunately. Jabu says, I think most fans think Tierney is worth around £40 to £45 million, and I agree. The value of the player is what selling clubs is willing to accept. And this is important. Is Tierney a £40 to £45 million player if he's playing every single week for a side like Arsenal? Yes, he probably is. Problem is, he doesn't play week in, week out for Arsenal. 2 reasons. 1, he can't, and has proven to show that he can't because of injury issues that have persistently affected every single season that he's played at the club. And secondly, he's now not first choice at the club. And Arsenal have brought in a £30 million player in Zinchenko, who has now overtaken him. And that's why you're not going to get the £40 to £45 million that he's probably worth if he is playing week in, week out. It's just the way that it goes, unfortunately. And because there's an openness to sell and because there's a willingness of the player to leave, that also contributes to that as well. So that's why 35 to 40 million pounds, I think, would be a really good return on any sale. But I think it's probably going to end up being closer to 30 million, but I hope that it's more. I really do want it to be more. But the realistic expectation from me is that around that 35 million pound mark is probably what we're going to get. 40 plus, I don't think it's just not realistic for the situation. Let's go to John says, is there any interest in Franck Kessié? Not as far as I'm aware, I'm afraid. Matt says, of the traditional top 4 teams, who has the most transfer work to do this summer? Probably Chelsea, because they've got about 70 million players and they've got to trim that squad down, which is a job in itself, and they still want to add more. They're adding more with Nkunku and Gusto coming into the group as well. Worth pointing out that I think, I'll have a quick check on this. But I'm pretty sure I was told that Gusto, the Lyon player that, of course, has been playing at France and under 21 level, was actually beaten into that squad by Sacha Boey. I don't know if there's an injury issue, but let me have a quick check to see if indeed he has suffered an injury this end of season that might have ruled him out. Just checking. I mean, he was injured. He did have hamstring injuries that cost him a few games. A fair few games, to be fair, but he did return in the last 6 games of the season. And of course, Lyon still play their last game today. So he could play in this game, but he's not been called up to the France under 21 squad. But maybe that was because of the injuries that he suffered before. But Bowie has been selected over him. But Chelsea, I think, have the most work to do because they've got to do a lot of work to streamline their squad for the new season. And still, they'll want to add players as well. Lynn says, yes, Tom, but Chelsea are looking for 55 million for Mason Mount, and he doesn't play every week. There's a problem with that, Lynn, unfortunately. I think that they're looking for an amount of money that is going to come from Manchester United. And Manchester United have a history of overpaying for players. B, Mason Mount is an England international, which is always going to raise his Premier League value when he moves from one Premier League team to another. Tierney is not homegrown, so it doesn't work that same way. Thirdly, Mason Mount is of a caliber that is not playing because of a lack of injury, but because of Chelsea's absolute mess of a squad, and a coaching situation, and clubs will appreciate that. Tierney's not playing because the player Zinchenko is a better option for him in the team, and he's been ousted from that position. Mount is not playing because of that same situation. Mount is very much capable of starting for this Chelsea side, even with all the players that they've brought in. But when you invest 100 million in Mudryk, when you invest £20 million package in a Joao Felix loan deal, when you invest that money in Madueke or Ziyech or whoever, or Havertz or Sterling, when you invest that money, you're going to have to play those players. So it's a very different reason, Lynn, why Mount isn't necessarily playing, and also why they're able to offer that much more. He's also an attacking midfielder who tend to draw a lot more in terms of money than left backs do as well. Let's go to Andrew says, hey, Tom, I don't understand why people are underestimating Xhaka. Who's underestimating him? I haven't seen anyone underestimating him. He's levels above Fabio and Emile Smith-Rowe, besides he's versatile player with potential for developing and adjusting. I wouldn't say he's levels above Smith-Rowe. I wouldn't argue too much against the Fabio Vieira comparison based upon last season. But Smith-Rowe is an incredibly talented player. I think you're underestimating him with that comment. But I don't think people are underestimating Xavi Simons. He's a very, very talented young player, and I certainly would be very happy to see Arsenal bring him in for next season. Let's go to Baby Verge says, if offers came in for Nketiah and Balogun at £40 million each, would you sell both? Without question. Yeah, without question. 80 million quid for Balogun and Nketiah would be unbelievably good business by Arsenal. So absolutely. You'd be able to go out and bring in a really good striker for 80 million quid. A really good striker. So yeah, without question, I would sell Nketiah and Balogun for 80 million combined to bring in a centre forward. I don't think you'll get anywhere near that amount of money for them both, but let's see what happens. Let's go to Jess Vance says, am I the only one who dreams of Koja Dubry having a breakthrough season? You're probably not, but I wouldn't get your hopes up necessarily. I think he's one of those players who'll probably go on loan in the lower leagues and get a chance to play more senior football more regularly before getting the opportunity to play at Arsenal. It's really difficult sometimes to send those players out on loan. We haven't sent Raul Waters out on loan yet. We haven't sent Koja Dubry out. We haven't sent some other players out, Lino Souza, for instance. And I think sometimes that's because the club look at them and think, if we do send them out to those lower leagues, there's no guarantees that will succeed. It's very rare that it happens. Smith-Rowe is one of the only opportunities that we've had. And Nketiah, you could argue as well. Reiss Nelson potentially, but Reiss Nelson left for Hoffenheim. He left for Feyenoord. He went abroad and did well. Particularly at Feyenoord, less so at Hoffenheim. But I think with someone like Patino, you look at that loan to Blackpool. Has that loan to Blackpool changed anything? Not really. It's not. He had a pretty decent season at Blackpool. It wasn't amazing. He was just decent at Blackpool. It's an okay season for him there. And he still ended up leaving, because there's not a pathway for him. So there's no guarantee just by sending those players on loan. I think that maybe there is a reluctance to do that sometimes. And maybe that's why Raul Waters hasn't gone. Maybe that's why Lino Souza hasn't gone. because the club want to kind of develop them in-house and give them the opportunities as well. But we've seen there are opportunities to send players abroad. You look at Balogun, for instance. You look at how Saliba did when he went back to France. Clive saying there, Liga is a great option for a few. And I think maybe sending them abroad to those top tiers, be it the Eredivisie, be it Liga, be it the Bundesliga, they are some great places where technically maybe you can develop more as a player than going to the lower leagues. You sometimes send players to the lower leagues in England to get them physically up to scratch, and they can do that in an environment where the language is the same, so they're more comfortable, But I think you have to look at Balogun and say, fair play, you've moved abroad, you've been able to do it there, and Liga is a physical league. There's no question about that. But also the technical level is higher than that of sending them to, say, the Championship or League One. So there's certainly benefits, that's for sure. If you haven't pressed the like button, please make sure you do, people. It takes you just a second, and I really would appreciate the kind support on the channel. Reynolds says, would you sell Partey if it meant getting Reiss and Caicedo? Probably yes, is the answer. If you could guarantee me both of those players are coming in, yes, I would probably sacrifice Partey to do it. There's no scope then that stops me from adding somebody else to the group as well. So yes, I probably would. Oh, by the way, I didn't include this in the main slides, but I've seen a couple of whispers around the Rafael Guerreiro thing. That was the most predictable link you've ever seen. We predicted it here. I've told you for a while that I've wanted to see Rafa Guerreiro. I've now seen certain people talking about that. Do take that with a pinch of salt, is all I would say. Certainly, as far as I'm aware, Bayern Munich, Atletico Madrid are the teams that are really looking at Rafa Guerreiro. I don't know it to be Arsenal at this stage. So do take those with a pinch of salt. They're quite a predictable link to make. Philip says, hey, Tom, can you give a shout out to my 1-day-old Gooner daughter, Freya? Also, big day for me being able to walk for the first time in 10 weeks after a triple leg break playing football. You see, playing football, Philip, it's just not for us, is it? But a massive congratulations to you and little Freya as well. She's chosen a very, very good team indeed, and I'm hoping that she'll have the chance to see plenty of trophies and league titles as she grows up. Congratulations, Philip. Let's go to Raj. Says, why can't we loan out players like Felix, a loan fee and his pay? I don't know if Atletico Madrid would entertain a loan deal for Joao Felix again. Yes, they've extended his contract by a year, but maybe they'll have plans for him next season. We'll have to wait and see. I don't necessarily think that loan to Chelsea was a massive success. That said, Chelsea was an absolute mess of a club for the rest of the season. So it's sometimes difficult to assess. I did like some of what I saw, and I didn't like other things that I saw. I think he had a very mixed loan spell. It started off well and obviously had that red card, but there were some really good things to see that. It's difficult. Fuad says, Pletterberg, the German-based journalist, is really pushing on Reiss going to Bayern. I don't think he's pushing it at all. I think he's just reporting what he knows around the Bayern side of things. Bayern are interested, and Bayern have got to put in a lot of work to convince Reiss to move to Bayern because his preference initially is the Premier League. That was what his preference was, and his source is going to very much closer be on the German side of things. So no, he's not pushing for things. I think this is the unfortunate misinterpretation sometimes of the work that journalists do. But he's certainly one of the better journalists out there in Germany to provide information. So I would not underestimate Florian Pletterberg's information at all. And he's not pushing it. That's not what he's doing. Let's go to no, boss. There are no links to Osimhen. I don't think Arsenal are going to be going for him, I'm afraid. Wilson says, are you serious, Tom, that you would consider selling Partey? Bloody hell, it makes no sense to sell Partey and Xhaka. Come on, man. I told you, if it was to guarantee me Reiss and Caicedo, I think I would do it. Yeah. Yes, I understand people are saying that's far too much change, and I get that. And I've been talking and preaching about reinforcing rather than replacing. Yes, but the likelihood of us getting Reiss and Caicedo in the same window, it's not, I don't think it's particularly high. The great chance of getting one of the two, I think, is really good. But I don't think the chance of getting both of them is as high. So I would, if you were guaranteeing me Partey and Reiss, Caicedo and Reiss, I'd take that. I would absolutely take that. And I would go to move for somebody else as well. Jazzland says, where's Basuma? Not gone so well, has he, at Spurs? I didn't agree with Tim Sherwood's comments, which I know is not an amazing statement. But I didn't agree with his comments about how Arsenal need to be careful about Caicedo. If you can't see the difference between Caicedo and Basuma, I don't know what to tell you. There is a very clear difference in their style, in their potential. I told you guys a lot. Like I was wary of the Basuma thing last summer, and so many people absolutely lambasted Arsenal for allowing Spurs to get hold of him. And I feel like those people haven't really held their hands up and been like, I was wrong about Basuma. You know, I really wasn't that keen on the whole thing. But he's not done well at Spurs. But I do think that there are very clear differences between Caicedo and Basuma. Let's go. African says Liverpool got 40 million for Ryan Brewster. No, they didn't. We're just making stuff up. I think they got 24 million pounds for Ryan Brewster. I mean, I will double check that for you. But where on earth are we getting that Ryan Brewster left for 40 million pounds? No, he went for 26 million euros. So yeah, 24 million pounds is what he went for. It's just not true. Let's go to Alpha says I'd sell both 100% if he was guaranteed to get both. We can build around those players. Partey is not as untouchable as we would love him to be. More than a wheelchair, says Tom. I'm sorry, but Zinchenko is so overrated, and Arteta constantly plays the inverted left back that he is. Gave away a lot of possession, leading to goals against us. Tierney is better if he plays to his strengths. He's just not. I disagree significantly. Zinchenko, as Elliot from the Vision loves to point out, and I love that he does, Zinchenko was contributed to 40% of our expected goal build-ups. You can't deny that level of contribution to what our goals have been this season. There's nothing overrated about Zinchenko. Zinchenko is one of the biggest reasons why we finished second this year and why we were able to take that next step forwards to becoming not just a team that challenges for top four, but a team that challenged for the title. And Tierney was part of those teams that challenged for top fours. Zinchenko's coming in has changed us to a team that now competes for a title. So no, I'm sorry. But with respect, you're wrong on that. And there's nothing overrated about Zinchenko. And that's why things dipped significantly at the end of the season as well when Zinchenko was missing. I've already covered the Tony Adams comments. So stop spamming the chat with that. I've already talked about it. Let's go to Jas Vance says Tapsoba is a perfect signing. Problem with Tapsoba is that whilst being right-footed, he's played predominantly on the left-hand side for Bayer Leverkusen of the back two. So I've not really seen too much of him playing on the right-hand side of the back two. I wouldn't say he's perfect. I think there are question marks about that, so I don't really know why. Jabu says Zinni is so disrespected. Do we need Zinchenko's cover or can Kivior do that job? It's interesting because I think Kivior and Tomiyasu, between them, there's potential there. Tomiyasu, I think, did well playing left back, and I think actually I preferred him to Tierney for much of the season playing in that role, especially when we come up against sides like Liverpool. If we'd have had maybe Tomiyasu to play in some of those games, I'm thinking about the Man City away game maybe, then maybe that would have been a better option. It gives us a greater variation in options, and I think that Tomiyasu is going to be an asset to us. The problem with Tomiyasu is his injury records, so it's difficult. It's difficult to always guarantee that. I'd like us to go out and bring in Guerrero on a free, but there's no tangible links to him at the moment, unfortunately. Let's go to Matt G says, but Tom, Everton got 180 million for Nancy Gordon. We're just making up fees now. Front Yard says, is Gabriel Magalhaes shout for unsung hero of Arsenal squad this season? Without a doubt, he featured in my player of the season chat. He absolutely is, and is an absolute asset to us. Absolute asset. More than a wheelchair says, Tom, a defender's main characteristics is to defend. Zinni can play the centre midfield position and Tierney at the left back. Then you have the best of both worlds to me. Again, a defender 20, 30 years ago, sure. Their main characteristic was to defend. And I want to bring in players that can defend. And by the way, our defensive record with Zinchenko and the team in the first half of the season was sublime. So let's not act like Zinchenko can't defend, because he can. He's not as good at defending as Tierney. But when it comes to the role and the structure and the system, Zinchenko's influence going forwards is so far more outweighing what his frailties are defensively. And if you look at some of the best teams that have won plenty of titles, are you telling me that Joao Cancelo under Pep Guardiola, that his main characteristic was defending? Because it wasn't. And yet look how many titles they won with him in that team. So I'm sorry, but when you're playing in a system where you've got Ben White, Saliba, Gabriel, whose main characteristics in a back four, those three are defending, you can afford to have that one that is a greater asset offensively than they are defensively. Moving to Patrick says, "Are we selling Norton Cuffy or giving him another loan? Doesn't look ready." I think you're right. He doesn't look ready at all. I don't think he is ready for Arsenal. I've talked about that a number of times. And I think that when it comes down to Norton Cuffy, he does need a loan. If he does get a loan, I think Liga would be a great place for him to go. I think that you could send him to a lower down the table Premier League side potentially to see if he can take that next step. But he's not ready for Arsenal. No, not at all. Let's go to where it says Tierney doesn't suit our system that Arteta wants to do. So saying that, who do you want in for Tierney? Who do I want in for Tierney? As I say, I think Rafael Guerreiro would be my choice as a replacement. But I do think that Kivior and Tomiyasu do give us depth now in that area as well. So that's also something that we have to consider. At the same time, let's go to Nexus. Says, sorry, I have to disagree with you on the Saliba thing. Was a miss. As soon as he got injured, things went downhill. Yeah, I don't know what you're disagreeing with, Nexus. There's no way in the world that you can't disagree with the fact that Saliba things went downhill. But if you look at the end of the season, right, so Zinchenko was missing for the Brighton game. And he was missing because he obviously missed out. He played in the Newcastle game when we took that 2-goal lead. Or rather the 1-goal lead, and at the end Tierney was on when we scored the second one. But as soon as we lost Zinchenko, we didn't have that same control that we had at the ball when we played Brighton, and we lost that game. We then went to Forest, didn't have Zinchenko again, and we just couldn't penetrate in the same way. Whilst we dominated possession, not that we really unbalanced ourselves, I think, in that game with Partey playing at right back. It wouldn't have been what I would have done. I would have rather, if they wanted to change things, played Xhaka at left back for me personally. But what Zinni was bringing into those games would have been so much greater, and that's why we lacked him in those two clear fixtures. I mean, if we'd have beaten Brighton and if we'd have beaten Nottingham Forest, who knows? The pressure could have changed things. I don't think it would have done, but it certainly would have, enabled us to be better as a team. So Zinchenko, we missed massively in those games, and we still won games without Saliba. But when we lost Saliba and Zinchenko, it was just too much of an unfortunate issue to face. That's funny. Two people asking about Trusty at the exact same time. How much are we getting for Trusty? Ronald says, says Jabu, and then Ronald says, would you sell or loan Trusty? I'd like to have a look at him. I'd like to see him in pre-season because he's had a great year at Birmingham. It's Birmingham in the Championship, and that is a different level, and there's no guarantees that will translate into something different. But I'd like to see what he could do. And I think that, if he plays pre-season as a good pre-season, we shouldn't be accepting the crazy low fees that we've been reported. I think we saw something like 3 million from Rangers was something discussed. I think he's worth more than that. I think he's improved since we bought him. So I'd like to have a look at him in pre-season and see what he does. And then after pre-season, we can have a chat. But until we've actually had a look at him, it's quite difficult to have a look at it or have a conclusion about Trusty. So let's wait and see. Let's see if we do get him back. I know that obviously he's going to be playing internationals with the US because we talked about that yesterday. But let's wait and see when he comes back what we can expect from him. So I look forward to it. Joey says, do we have a TGT community on Twitter? Everyone here sounds like their brains work. I don't know what a Twitter community is. I always kind of avoid having Twitter communities in general because Twitter is an awful place filled with not very nice people. That's why we have our members Discord server, Jabu. So if you become a member, you can join our Discord, and that's a very good community to be a part of, and it helps support the channel as well. RM says, cheeky bid for Colwill. He's miles better than Kivior, just 20 years old, future Gabriel. We've only just bought Kivior. I don't understand this. We've only just bought Kivior. We spent 20 million quid on the guy. We've barely seen what he's capable of. He's had some really good games and some less good games. But at Newcastle, I thought he was great. I don't really get the desire to all of a sudden replace him. Yeah, Colwill is a fantastic young player that's going to cost you well upwards of probably £40 million to try and sign him. I don't know why. I don't know why that's even a question mark at the moment. We've just bought Kivior. It's strange. I don't get the necessity, the desire, the desperation to just try and replace players almost immediately. You've got to give these players a bit of a chance. Yeah, Justin says no to Twitter. Discord is just fine. Absolutely, it is. Indu P Pereiro says Indubio Pereiro says Sergio Ramos as a Saliba backup, peak winner mentality. No, I don't think so. You've got to now convince Saliba that we've got to give him a contract, right? And Sergio Ramos is on a stupid amount of money, and he's being offered an even more stupid amount of money in Saudi Arabia, I think, to move out there. I don't think it makes sense to bring in Sergio Ramos, to be honest. I just don't think it makes sense at the moment to do that. He's going to want to start. Why would he move to a club he's not going to start at? And if we're trying to renew Saliba's contract, bringing in Sergio Ramos, I'm not sure is the right way forwards there. So, yeah, Red Rain says, too many fans think football is like Football Manager. I say it all the time. FIFA and Football Manager are the biggest enemies to objective, grounded transfer thought these days. It really is. So, yeah, I think that's where we'll end things today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Really appreciate your time, as always. Do drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll be back tomorrow morning, of course, with more information about what's gone on in the world of Arsenal's transfers from the past 24 hours and more opportunities to discuss with you guys in the chat box. We really appreciate everything that you've done, and I look forward to speaking with you again. Have a fantastic Saturday. Enjoy it. Is the FA Cup final today, or is it tomorrow? Let's have a quick look. FA Cup final is 3 o'clock today, so I'll be watching that. Let's hope for a Manchester City win, shall we? I don't want to see Man United winning it. I just can't deal with that. So, yeah, fingers crossed for a Man City victory, and they can take away their treble at the same time with a Champions League win next weekend also. Enjoy your weekend. See you soon. And as always, up the Arsenal. Oh, and go and watch our video from the Emirates yesterday. Last upload on the channel. See you soon, guys.